Model's approach to unified endpoint management. This presentation is going to cover security level 4 of our maturity model. If you've missed the introductory video or any video thereafter in this series, you can find them linked from our webpage at model-technology.com. So the agenda for this video, we're going to go through a brief round of introductions. We'll talk about what unified endpoint management is. We'll review the maturity model phases and categories. We'll talk specifically about Endpoint Security Level 4, a little bit about Model Technology Solutions. So we are experts in endpoint management, security, and automation. We have two main practices. We have a project practice that is your traditional time and materials or fixed fee based on a set of objectives and deliverables. And then we have a services practice or managed services practice that will operationalize and maintain a variety of different services in your organization. Pretty focused in our areas of expertise, and we're a Microsoft Gold partner. So let's talk about what unified endpoint management means. So generally speaking, a single platform for management of devices such as phones, tablets, desktops that support a plethora of different use cases is the standard definition. A model, we look at it just a little different. So we add in processes that take into account your organization's security needs and personas. Things like application needs are kind of thrown in the mix. And the goal is to enable productivity while reducing any potential security risks. So our maturity model. So we spent time putting together what we classify as the unified endpoint maturity model. And there are 5 phases to the model. The initial phase, the repeatable phase, defined phase, managed, and efficient. And these phases all have a variety of characteristics that define the phase themselves. And today we're going to be discussing in depth the level 4 or managed security phase, so security for endpoints. And what you're going to find is that the endpoint security branches out a little more into organizational security as well, which we'll dive into as we go. But these maturity model phases are not new. We did not make these up, but they are something that the industry uses pretty frequently. Here are the maturity model categories as they pertain to unified endpoint management. So we broke it up into management infrastructure, things like Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, configuration management, security baselines, device provisioning, and deprovisioning as an example. Updates and servicing management, so your monthly processes, your operating system versions, testing and validation procedures. The application management, so everything from the installation process to an automation around personas as an example. So the app delivery automation assessment that says if you're this kind of person in this kind of role in the organization, you get these kind of applications. And then finally, the category we're going to spend the most time in today, the endpoint security. So having central management and reporting, data management and app containerization, things like risk-based conditional access policies. So we're going to get into some of that today. And really, the goal of the maturity model is to assess where you are in each one of these 5 categories and take the categories, configuration management, updates, etc., and apply to them the phase or the maturity that you're in there. The outcome is a findings and recommendations report that will really give you what the next step in each one of these categories would be for your organization as it pertains to unified endpoint management. So, endpoint security level 4. So to start, let's first define what a level 4 for endpoint looks like. And so generally speaking, for an endpoint level 4 or a managed capable state, we have centralized security tools that are integrated into the endpoint management toolset to provide easy identification of your security posture and the state of enforcement for those requirements, okay? So we'll talk more about that momentarily. The application level management is deployed and secures access to organizational resources from unmanaged endpoints or behaves differently from unmanaged endpoints. We'll get to that, what that means. The user authentication requiring multi-factor, that should be done and set at this point if you're in a level 4 capable state. So you're reducing the risk of compromised credentials and exposing the organization to threats by leveraging a multi-factor authentication process. You're leveraging things like conditional access logic or session controls to restrict resources or to change how resources behave based on some conditions of potentially the user and device. And maybe you have some availability to analytics, but you're not actively monitoring them or taking any action on them. So that's what we're really classifying as a level 4 managed capable state. And so from the outside, this is a pretty sophisticated setup, right? We'll kind of dive into what some of this looks like. So let's go into the examples of what security level 4 looks like. So let's talk about some centralized tools. So as an example, Microsoft 365 Defender, which is aggregating the different Defender components into a single dashboard, or Defender for Cloud, which takes another series of different components like firewall or regulatory compliance and secure score against all your Azure resources, or something like Defender for Cloud Apps as an example. That's aggregating your shadow IT, session controls, discovered applications, and looking at all the different areas and providing a single console or a single pane of glass for that. So having a centralized, sophisticated set of tools that you're using to control the endpoint and then monitor the state of the endpoint is a component of a security level 4. Additionally, things like app discovery, app isolation, app tagging or classification, and then app alerting are all examples of what application management level is required to be at a level 4. And so here's an example of our compliance dashboard alert that we received of a user that had unusual addition to credentials of our ServiceNow app. So not just applications that are installed on devices or endpoints, but also SaaS or service-based applications like ServiceNow is a great example of this. And so having an alert that something was an unusual addition of credentials on that OAuth application to an approved application is just great information to have and shows a certain level of maturity in your security stack as it pertains to the endpoint. Next up, we have conditional access or session controls. So enforcement of data access policies, things like, as an example, guest accounts or trusted versus non-trusted devices. So here's an example of a production MFA guest account that's going to require the grant, or it's going to allow the grant control after multi-factor authentication has been satisfied. Or another example is using the CASB or the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps to leverage a conditional access control, just like the guest MFA, that interrogates the state of the device to determine if the device is, let's say it's a home device or not a trusted device, to be able to kick it over for session controls to now block, let's say, downloads from SharePoint Online, as an example. So a user might have full control to SharePoint Online under regular circumstances. They use a home machine to access their SharePoint Online. We want to take that information and block the download. And then analytics. So the final piece to the puzzle here. So they may not be fully monitored in a level 4 categorization, but they do exist and the data is available as needed. So as an example, here's another dashboard from our Cloud App Discovery. We can see all the apps, IP addresses, users we've discovered in this scenario. And in the top right, you'll notice that this is based on Windows 10 endpoint users, which is why this is in the Unified Endpoint Management maturity model. Now, and I'll get to more of this later, we do have an assessment for M365 Defender All Up, which is separate and a little more in-depth than what this will go into as it pertains to your Defender configuration and security posture. But generally speaking, in a level 4 managed capable state, you're pretty advanced and you've got these analytics that you can go tap into when needed or troubleshoot something as it comes up, right? So that's the overview, a very high-level overview of our security level 4 categorization and phase. And so we are offering an assessment of your unified endpoint maturity for your organization. What that consists of is 2 90-minute sessions and a pre-meeting questionnaire to fill out. Out of that comes a findings and prioritized recommendations. And what that means is we will not give you a full roadmap from start to finish, soup to nuts, of what you need to do in every category by phase. However, we will assess if you're in a phase 3 or a phase 2 of a certain category, how to get to the next phase, the phase 4, the phase 3 of that category. We will provide recommendations, and they're very high level, but they are actionable steps that you can use and to take to move your organization in a toward state of a more mature unified endpoint management service. So the cost of that assessment is $3,000. And if you're interested, for the same price, we will do a Defender assessment where we take a look at your cloud app security broker. We take a look at Defender for endpoint, Defender for identity, look at the different alerts, your security scores, the session alerts, all of the different components, and make recommendations very similar to how this is done. More information will follow on the Defender assessment in time. So with that, if you have any questions, you can find me at jason.rutherford@model-technology.com, and you can always get a hold of us through our website at model-technology.com. Thank you.